Have you noticed that the worst violations of citizens' rights on the issue of lockdown protests come from the former British Dominions? What are the British Dominions? They are white territories controlled by the British Empire before the Second World War. Do people know why this status was changed after the Second World War? This is one of the more interesting questions of British identity. The term Dominion was used to refer to one of several self-governing nations of the British Empire. Dominion status was accorded to Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Newfoundland, South Africa, and the Irish Free State at the 1926 Imperial Conference to designate autonomous communities within the British Empire, equal in status, in no way subordinate one to another in any aspect of their domestic or external affairs, though united by common allegiance to the Crown and freely associated as members of the British Commonwealth nations. India, Pakistan, and Ceylon, now Sri Lanka, were also dominions for short periods of time. The Balfour Declaration of 1926 recognized the dominions as autonomous communities within the British Empire, and the 1931 Statute of Westminster confirmed their full legislative independence. With the dissolution of the British Empire after World War II and the formation of the Commonwealth of Nations, it was decided the term Commonwealth country should formally replace Dominion for official Commonwealth usage. This decision was made during the 1949 Commonwealth Prime Ministers' Conference when India was intending to become a republic, so that both types of governments could become and remain full members of the Commonwealth, and this term hence refers to autonomous dominions and republics. Now, what is a dominion, eh? It means that you are dominated. Although officially it says self-governing autonomous state within the British Empire. It's kind of, yeah, but no. Deliberately opaque. Let's look up what it actually means. In the dictionary sense. There we go. I like the free dictionary. So this is my first port of call when I want to look up a word. It means, dominion means 1, control or the exercise of control, sovereignty. 2, a territory or sphere of influence or control, a realm. 3, it's just one of the alternatives. Often dominion, a self-governing nation under the nominal rule of the British monarch. Not so nominal, is it, really? If you think of Australia and its director, what was it? Governor General. Let's have a look. Director General? What are they called? Australian government. Still technically under British control, just because it's got this sort of pesky thing called the Governor General of Australia, Monarchy of Australia, and Governor General of Australia. Representative of the monarch, appointed by the monarch on the recommendation of government ministers. The Governor General has formal presidency over the Federal Executive Council and is Commander-in-Chief of the Australian Defence Force. The functions of the Governor-General include appointing ministers, prime ministers, judges and ambassadors, giving royal assent to legislation passed by Parliament, issuing writs for election and bestowing Australian honours. So, how autonomous are, in fact, the Australians? Not very autonomous, I would suggest. Let's have a look at the Governor General of Canada. They still have this thing called the Governor General, don't they? Of course, using Wikipedia. I have no complaints about Wikipedia. It's very useful to me. Commander-in-Chief of Canada. Now, who might that be? The Commander-in-Chief of the Canadian Armed Forces exercises supreme command and control over Canada's military, the Canadian Armed Forces. Constitutionally, the Command-in-Chief is vested in the Canadian monarch, Queen Elizabeth II. Since the letters patent 1947 were signed by King George VI and the Governor-General of Canada, presently Mary Simon executes most of the duties of the sovereign, including in her role as Commander-in-Chief. Consequently, the Governor-General also uses the title Commander-in-Chief of the Canadian Forces. By protocol, the title used within the international context is Commander-in-Chief of Canada. So who is this Mary Simon? She was born in Quebec. I'm not going to pronounce the name of her hometown. So she was just appointed in 2021. Well, what's going on? Who was it before? The previous one was somebody called Julie Payette. She resigned in 2021. Now, let's have a look at these Governor Generals of Canada. You know, it kind of explains everything, really, if you think about it. So it's now Mary Simon in 20, and before that was Julie Payette. Before that was David Lloyd Johnston, and before that was somebody called, what non-white woman, Canadian journalist, somebody called Mikhail Young. And before that was Adrienne Clarkson, and before that was somebody called Romeo LeBlanc, and somebody called, before that was Ramon Jean, I'm not going to pronounce his name, Nutsin or something. Before that was somebody called Jean Sauvé. Before that was, well, it's It's looking a bit dodgy, isn't it? So I've basically explained to you why the Canadians and Australians are so cocked. They don't really have their own independent constitutional tradition. They are actually still British. They say, oh, nominally British. We just have the Queen in the background, but you share the same Queen, but actually the Queen appoints all these people who control your armed forces. So have a little think, people in Australia and Canada. Have a little think about your history and your constitution and your national origins. Can you be both nominally British and not really British? Can you have national independence when you have a governor general in charge of your armed forces? Understand who and what you are. Identity politics is understanding who you are and what you ought to be. And understanding also the meaning of words such as dominion. You have dominion over your subject peoples, do you not? And when somebody's saying, oh, dominion doesn't mean that, we're equal in status. How true do you think it is? You see, if Britain were to become a republic, well, Australia and Canada would have its own, well, would enjoy national sovereignty at last. So when Alexander Mercouris said words to the effect of the British people being fond of the Queen, what do they really know? The institution of the monarchy allows Britain to still tell Canadians and Australians who their Prime Minister should be. I have noticed in recent years that Australian Prime Ministers are changed almost as often as one might change one's underwear. For no reason at all, certainly not even within the context of a national election, but perhaps it would be incorrect to talk about Australia and Canada enjoying national sovereignty. So know who you are and what you are, Australians and Canadians. And if Britain were to no longer be a monarchy, there will be changes to Australian and Canadian government. So I must thank Alexander Mercouris for apparently pointlessly saying that the people are fond of the Queen and the monarchy might not survive for longer than the lifetime of the present monarch. The monarchy is necessary for Britain to indirectly assert control over the territory, its former territories. Well, not former, but you know what I mean. Its dominions in Australia, in New Zealand, in Canada. And of course, it has basically handed over control to the Americans because Britain is but subject to America because Britain recently has been treated as if it were an American state, in particular the American states of California and Florida, where the age of consent is 18. So that was how the Americans got Andrew, now forced to cough up millions of pounds to a retired American prostitute. So beware, men, because your status will be even lower than that of Prince Andrew. I see Ralph is in the chat, not really getting anything that I have said. He doesn't really understand that I am saying something of great significance. I don't know if he's pretending not to understand or if he really doesn't understand what I'm trying to say. It doesn't matter. I will continue to point things out anyway, things that ought to be obvious to people who think a little. But more will come out in the wash very soon.